Thank you for spending your time with Listen and Imagine. We hope this journey sparked your thoughts and stirred your imagination. Series title NASA is Hiding the Truth About Space, a 10-part conspiracy series exploring the secrets beyond the stars. Part 1, The Curtain of Stars, What Are We Not Seeing? Opening scene, dark ambient music, voice slowly fades in. Have you ever looked up at the night sky and felt like something's not quite right? Really looked? All those stars scattered across the sky, so far away, so unreachable. It's beautiful and yet strangely distant, like a movie you're only allowed to watch, never touch. For decades, we've been told space is the final frontier, that NASA, the gold standard of space exploration, is leading the charge for humanity. But what if the story we've been sold is incomplete, or worse, entirely manufactured? Scene voice firm, investigative tone. NASA controls over 90% of the data and images the public receives about space. Think about that. The most powerful lens we have into the universe is held by one institution, highly selective in what it shows, when it shows it, and how it's presented. Why? Why would an agency founded on the idea of open scientific exploration limit access to the raw footage of our cosmos? They say it's to protect national security, or avoid confusion, or filter noise. But let me ask you this. Since when did science need censorship? Narrator lowers tone. Did you know that almost every image of a galaxy, a nebula, or a distant planet you've seen was altered before you ever laid eyes on it? NASA admits it. Many of their public photos are composites. That means what you're seeing is a reconstruction, pieced together, colorized, and enhanced. Now sure, part of that is technical. Space is dark. Data comes in different wavelengths, infrared, ultraviolet, X-ray. Scientists need to translate it into visible colors. But where's the line? At what point does enhancement become manipulation? And if they're willing to reimagine the colors of space, what else might they be reimagining? Pause, then a shift in tone, slightly skeptical. Let's go back to the moon. It's 1969, humanity's biggest leap, and NASA shows us grainy footage of Neil Armstrong's first steps. Amazing, right? But here's what's strange. For such a monumental moment, the most important broadcast in history, the original broadcast wasn't even saved. The original moon landing tapes? Lost, erased, reused. NASA claimed they taped over them to save money. Does that sound like something the most advanced space agency on Earth would do? Or something they'd say when they didn't want you to see what was really on those tapes? Builds momentum. Let's talk about images. Look up NASA's Earth photos over the years. Notice anything odd? Some Earths are different sizes. Cloud patterns repeat, identically. The continents look weirdly inconsistent. There's a famous quote from a NASA artist, yes, artist, named Robert Simon. He helped create one of the most famous images of Earth, the blue marble from 2002. He admitted it was photoshopped. I had to add clouds manually, he said, because the satellite data didn't cover the whole Earth. Wait, what? Why would NASA need an artist to create a photo of Earth when they supposedly have satellites orbiting 24/7? Tone drops, more mysterious. Could it be that we're not just being shown an edited version of space, but a scripted version? A carefully curated slideshow, tailored to inspire wonder, yes, but also to obscure the full truth? It raises a dangerous question. What are we not seeing? Introduce curiosity, a trail of doubt. Think about this. In a world where amateur astronomers can photograph Saturn's rings from their backyard, why is it still nearly impossible to find real-time live footage of Earth from space? NASA has several satellites in geostationary orbit, right? So where's the unedited, continuous, high-definition stream of our planet? Instead, we get occasional still images, carefully labeled, carefully timed, carefully filtered. Almost like someone is managing the narrative. Narrator slows down. Deepens tone. Now let's talk about the stars. Go back to the Apollo photos. The astronauts are on the moon's surface, a place with no atmosphere, no light pollution. It should be the clearest view of the cosmos we've ever had. So where are the stars? Why are the skies in those photos pitch black? NASA says the camera exposure settings weren't designed to capture stars. But here's the twist. We've had modern DSLR cameras on the International Space Station for years now, and yet we still get very few photos filled with stars. What are they hiding behind the darkness? Now, to be fair, some of this can be explained by science. Cameras need longer exposure to capture starlight. And yes, composite imaging is common in astrophysics. But that's not the issue. The issue is transparency. NASA doesn't just process images, they curate them, decide what you see, what you don't, when, and how. That's not science. That's storytelling. Voice rises slightly. And in storytelling, the narrator has power. So who is narrating our place in the universe? Is it scientists or scriptwriters? And if NASA is editing the sky, what else are they editing? The stars have guided sailors, mystics, and dreamers for millennia. But now, in the age of satellites and supercomputers, we're told to trust what we're shown, not what we see. What if we've only been looking at a stage backdrop, a celestial curtain? And behind that curtain, what secrets still sleep? What if space isn't just up there, but carefully managed down here? In part 2, we'll explore one of NASA's greatest inconsistencies, the Van Allen radiation belt, and why it might prove we've never gone as far as we think. But until then, ask yourself, why is the truth about space always just out of reach? Part 2, the Van Allen radiation belt, the barrier to the moon, atmospheric background, low pulsing sound like distant energy. Previously, we talked about how NASA curates what we see, how our view of space is filtered, polished, and sometimes suspiciously quiet. But tonight, we go deeper, not into the stars, but into the space between, into something that most people have never heard of, but which could be the key to unraveling the entire moon landing narrative. Let me ask you this. If there was a massive, invisible wall of radiation surrounding Earth, one that could melt electronics and kill humans in minutes, would you try to fly a rocket through it? Well, according to NASA, we did, in the 1960s. Narrator leans in, voice steady. Let me introduce you to the Van Allen radiation belt. Discovered in 1958 by Dr. James Van Allen, right as the space race was heating up. This swirling region of charged particles trapped by Earth's magnetic field forms two donut-shaped belts around our planet. These belts are flooded with high-energy protons and electrons from solar winds. They're not just a minor inconvenience. They're lethal. They pulse with radiation so intense, astronauts flying through them without serious shielding would risk radiation poisoning, genetic damage, or worse. And yet, NASA says we casually flew astronauts through them multiple times over 50 years ago. No problem. Suspense builds, sound fades. Let's slow this down. Imagine we've just entered the space age. It's 1969. Computers barely exist. Phones still have cords. The average home has less computing power than a digital watch today. And NASA claims they launched 3 men in a thin metal can through 25,000 miles of deadly radiation to the moon and back with no shielding. No radiation burns. No cancer. No malfunction, not even nausea. And then they just did it again and again and again, 6 times in 3 years, all flawlessly. No casualties, no permanent health issues. Sound too good to be true? Tone drops, voice softens, but intense. Now here's where it gets even stranger. In 2014, NASA launched the Orion spacecraft, designed to eventually take humans to Mars. During a test flight, NASA engineer Kelly Smith made a quiet but astonishing admission. He said, "We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space. Protection against radiation is crucial." Hold on. Did he just say we haven't solved the problem of safely passing through the Van Allen belt in 2014? 50 years after the Apollo missions? Silence, then narrator's voice returned. If we went to the moon in 1969, shouldn't we already know how to deal with the radiation? Why are NASA scientists in the 21st century saying we still need to solve it? And here's the kicker. Orion was unmanned. They were still testing systems, decades after supposedly conquering this exact region of space. Does that sound like progress? Or a cover-up? Switch to data tone, scientific curiosity. Let's break down the science. The Van Allen belts are located roughly 600 to 36,000 kilometers above Earth. That means any spacecraft heading toward the moon must pass through them. Radiation levels vary, but certain parts can reach 1,000 times the safe dose for a human being. NASA says the Apollo missions used a fast trajectory to limit exposure. They say the astronauts spent less than an hour in the belt, reducing the dose to acceptable levels. Acceptable. For what standard? Even short-term exposure can cause long-term damage. So why weren't the astronauts tested rigorously afterward? Why weren't they quarantined for radiation sickness? Why did no one, not a single crew member, ever mention the belts as even mildly concerning? Wouldn't flying through a zone of death warrant, at the very least, a sentence? Transition. Psychological doubt builds. But here's where things get really weird. Modern spacecraft, including satellites, probes, and even the International Space Station, are still engineered to avoid the Van Allen belts. Even decades later, engineers go out of their way to navigate around them. Why? Because they're dangerous. NASA's own documents acknowledge this. The belts interfere with electronics. They can corrupt data, fry circuits. And yes, they pose real risk to biological tissue. So if today's space hardware can't safely pass through, what magic shield did we have in the 60s? Aluminum foil? Mood darkens. Touch of conspiracy? Maybe that's why so many believe the Apollo missions were staged. Not because we couldn't get to the moon, but because we couldn't get through the wall. The Van Allen wall. A deadly ring of fire wrapped around Earth like a force field. One that we're still trying to understand, still trying to beat, even after half a century. NASA never talks about this. Mainstream media never questions it. And the public, well, most people have never even heard of the Van Allen belts. But for those who have, it's the crack in the facade. So what are the possible explanations? Did NASA lie about the Apollo missions? Did they send unmanned craft and fake the crew landings? Did they use footage shot on Earth, a soundstage perhaps, to simulate success? Or is there a secret technology unknown to the public that allowed passage? If so, where did it come from? Alien reverse engineering? Advanced propulsion? Something outside our understanding? Or is the simplest explanation still the most likely, that we never left? Miss Slows. Think of the Van Allen belt like an invisible guardian, a threshold, a cosmic checkpoint. It surrounds us like a cage, holding us in, keeping us grounded. The stars call to us, but this energy field, this natural barrier says, not yet. And that raises another question. Is someone or something keeping us here? Close with dramatic beat. They say the universe is infinite, that we're destined to explore it. But if we're trapped inside a shell of deadly radiation, maybe we're not as free as we think. Maybe the Van Allen belt wasn't just an obstacle. Maybe it was a message, a warning. And if that's true, then everything NASA claims about space travel needs to be questioned. Everything. Closing hook. Questions for the next part. In part 3, we dive into another mystery, the missing Apollo tapes, the original recordings of mankind's greatest achievement, conveniently lost. But before we get there, ask yourself, why would NASA risk lives by sending humans through a radiation zone we still don't fully understand? Why, after all these years, is no one else going back the same way? And most of all, what did they see or not see on the other side? Stay curious, stay skeptical, stay watching. Part 3, the missing Apollo tapes, lost or erased. Opening, slow fade in, dusty tape reel sound effect, then silence. The narrator speaks softly with a curious edge. Imagine filming mankind's most extraordinary achievement and then taping over it. Not a sitcom, not a soap opera rerun, but the moment humanity first stepped foot on another world. Now ask yourself, does that make any sense? Because that's exactly what NASA says happened to the original moon landing tapes. Gone, erased, overwritten. Think about that. We're not talking about duplicates, not secondhand reels or broadcast versions. We're talking about the original telemetry tapes, the master recordings from July 20th, 1969, Apollo 11. Vanished. Narrator shifts to investigative tone. Let's rewind. July 1969, over 500 million people around the world watch live as Neil Armstrong makes history. One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. The grainy footage, the flickering black and white image, that's what we all remember. But here's the twist. That wasn't the original broadcast. It was a converted version, filmed off a monitor, a secondary feed. The actual high-resolution slow-scan TV SSTV data beamed from the moon to Earth, that footage was captured on magnetic telemetry tapes at NASA's ground stations. Those tapes, they're gone. Voice lowers, intimate and unsettling. In 2006, after 3 years of searching, interviews, investigations, and internal reviews, NASA finally admitted the most likely scenario is that the tapes were erased and reused. Let that sink in. The United States of America, the same country that preserved Civil War letters, moon rocks, and Abraham Lincoln's hat, managed to lose the most important audiovisual artifact in human history because they needed to reuse the tapes. Really? Narrator leans in. Skeptical tone. Let me ask you something. If the moon landing was real, if it was the crowning achievement of the 20th century, why would NASA not safeguard every inch of that original data? Why not store it in a vault, in a museum, in 10 backup locations? Why let it be erased? We're not talking about an accident here. NASA had thousands of unused tapes, blank reels, entire warehouses of archival space. So why reuse those? Why erase history? Or was it erased on purpose? Then inquisitive tone. Here's where things start to feel orchestrated. The lost Apollo 11 tapes aren't the only data that mysteriously disappeared. Telemetry data, the detailed technical readings from the flight, is also missing. Blueprints for key Apollo systems, also missing. Thousands of pages of mission data, misplaced. Gone. Why? Wouldn't you expect an agency like NASA to have airtight archives? To treat the moon mission like a sacred relic? And yet, it all vanished. Like smoke in sunlight. Narrator's tone deepens, bringing back Van Allen theme from... Now remember what we talked about in part 2, the Van Allen radiation belts. If passing through those belts was such a technological feat, wouldn't you want every inch of that journey documented? Proof that it was possible? Instead, what do we get? Missing tapes, lost telemetry, vague explanations. Shaky video from a TV camera pointed at another screen. Does that inspire confidence? Or does it sound like someone's hiding something? Subtle transition, scientific grounding. Let's take a closer look at those tapes. The original SSTV signal, the one broadcast from the lunar module, was 10 times the resolution of the TV signal the public saw. It was clearer, crisper, and uncompressed. That data was received at 3 primary ground stations: Goldstone, USA, Parkes, Australia, and Honeysuckle Creek, Australia. All 3 stations recorded the raw data on magnetic reels. And yet, in the early 1980s, NASA began tape recycling. Thousands of tapes were wiped and reused due to budget constraints. Apparently, the Apollo 11 master tapes were among them. Reused. To save money. Let me ask you again, does NASA, the world's most advanced space agency, really erase moon landing footage to pinch pennies? Or were they removing evidence that could be studied, scrutinized, re-examined with modern tools, maybe evidence that didn't quite match the official story? Mood turns quiet, conspiratorial. Now here's a name you probably haven't heard: Stan Labar. He was the man in charge of the TV camera system used on the moon. Before he died, he admitted, there were issues with the original footage. What you saw on television wasn't what we recorded. Wait, what? What was recorded? And if even the camera designer questioned the footage, what does that say about the story we've been told? The narrator slows, tone becomes reflective. Let's pretend for a second that the Apollo 11 landing wasn't filmed on the moon. Let's just suppose, for the sake of theory, that it was recreated in part or in whole here on Earth. Wouldn't the original tapes be a liability? Wouldn't they reveal discrepancies, lighting errors, inconsistencies, background artifacts? Wouldn't it make sense to quietly erase them? To make sure that no future scientist, no curious filmmaker, no whistleblower could uncover what they weren't supposed to see? Maybe that's why they're gone. Not because someone forgot, but because someone remembered too well. And if the footage of Apollo 11, the first moon landing, is missing, how much trust can we place in anything that followed? Apollo 12, 14, 15, 16, 17, the ISS live feeds that go dark every time an object enters the frame, the delayed Mars rover images, the heavily photoshopped Earth composites, what else have we lost? Or rather, what else has been intentionally hidden? Tone shifts, mysterious closing mood, compelling and quiet. The moon landing was supposed to unite the world, proof of human potential. But maybe, just maybe, it was also a story, a powerful story, crafted, told, sold, and protected at all costs, including the cost of the truth. Closing hook, setting up the next chapter. In part 4, we'll peel back another layer, the world of photoshopped space. We'll ask, why do NASA's images of Earth change over the years? Why are stars missing from space photos? And what's with all the artist renderings? But before we go there, Ask yourself, why would NASA erase the original record of mankind's greatest achievement? Why do critical mission documents keep disappearing? And if they're so careless with history, what does that say about the future they're building for us? Part 4, Photoshopped Space, the truth behind NASA images. Opening, calm music, then cuts to static, then narrator speaks clearly but curiously. Let me ask you something. When you search Earth from space on Google Images, how many different Earths do you see? Different colors, different cloud patterns, different continents, different sizes. Sometimes the oceans are turquoise blue, sometimes dark navy. Sometimes the continents are blurry or suspiciously perfect. And here's the real kicker. Sometimes the Earth looks too perfect, almost like a desktop background. Now, here's the question. If Earth is real and NASA has thousands of satellites, cameras, rovers, and missions, why are so many of the images of our planet computer-generated? Why does NASA, with a multi-billion-dollar budget, give us photoshopped Earths? Narrator's tone sharpens, like talking to a close friend, urgently but calmly. You might be thinking, hold on, surely NASA has real photos, don't they? Well, they say they do. But let's take a closer look. The most iconic image of Earth, the blue marble, was taken in 1972 by the crew of Apollo 17. That's right, 1972. Before smartphones, before Photoshop, before HD cameras, and yet somehow it remains the clearest and most widely used photo of our planet. You're telling me we went over 50 years without getting a better one? Narrator drops a fact bomb, like tone still conversational. Now here's something you might not know. Robert Simon, a NASA data visualizer, once admitted, on record, that many of NASA's Earth images are not photographs, but composite images. You heard that right. Here's what he said. It is photoshopped, but it has to be. There's no way to take a full picture of Earth in one shot. Wait, NASA, the organization that sent men to the moon and rovers to Mars, can't take a single photo of the Earth, even with dozens of satellites circling the globe every hour? Instead, they take strips of data, stitch them together, and color them using artistic interpretation. That's not photography. That's digital art. Smooth transition. And that's where things get weird. In different versions of Earth images NASA has released over the years, you'll notice inconsistencies. Cloud patterns repeating like a copy-paste tool. No stars in the background. The continents appear out of proportion. Sometimes North America is massive, sometimes tiny. What's going on? Could this be just innocent image processing? Maybe. Or is it something more? Are they hiding the real appearance of Earth? Flashback tone, connecting back to Apollo missions. Now, remember in part 3, we talked about the missing Apollo 11 tapes. So if the video of the moon landing can disappear, if the telemetry data of the most important mission in history can vanish, then why should we believe the photos? Especially when NASA openly admits to manipulating them? Tone sharpens again. Questions for the listener, inviting doubt. Where are the real images? Where is the unprocessed raw data? Why can't we find continuous real-time footage of a full rotation of Earth from space? Why does the live feed from the ISS cut out every time a strange object appears? You'd think with today's tech, 4K smartphones, 24/7 live streams, gigabytes of bandwidth, we'd have crystal clear, uninterrupted Earth videos. But we don't. We get clips. We get artist renditions. We get clouds that look like someone dragged them in Photoshop. Introduce an anomaly. Voice drops lower, more serious. And then there's the Discover satellite, a joint project with NASA and NOAA. It was supposed to deliver constant real-time images of Earth. It launched. It worked. But within months, the stream went offline for maintenance. Then silence. Then NASA quietly shifted focus elsewhere. No more live Earth, just a few processed stills now and then. Convenient, right? Tone moves towards scientific skepticism. Let's talk about the absence of stars in space photos. You ever notice how in most images of astronauts or Earth taken from space, the stars are missing? NASA explains this by saying the camera exposure settings were too low to capture starlight. But photographers have challenged this for years. If the moon is lit bright enough for us to see detail, shouldn't the darkness around it be filled with stars? You've seen photos taken on a clear night from Earth, full of constellations. So why not from space? The truth? Maybe it's hard to fake the stars. Too random, too specific, too easy for astronomers to analyze and say, wait, like that star shouldn't be there. So maybe they just leave them out, just to be safe. The mysterious tone rises again. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. But when the pictures are artificial, altered, or incomplete, what words are they really speaking? Truth or fiction, science or storytelling? Narrator turns serious, a slow build in intensity. Let's take this a step further. If NASA is manipulating images of Earth, what about Mars? What about the Moon? In 2015, users on NASA's own website discovered a blacked out area in a Mars photo, a perfect rectangular blur. Why censor a Martian rock? Unless it wasn't a rock. And why do some moon images show perfectly straight structures, angular shadows, glitches in terrain? NASA often explains them away as compression errors. But we've seen compression. These don't look like glitches. They look like cover-ups. Transition to closing, tone reflective but subtly chilling. Maybe you're wondering, why would they fake this? What's the motive? Some say it's control, to shape the public's view of reality. Some say it's budget, to keep funding rolling in by selling the dream of exploration. Some say it's because the real Earth doesn't look the way we've been told. Round, flat, something else entirely. Or perhaps it's not the shape that matters, but what's being hidden above and below. Because if NASA's willing to Photoshop planets, what else are they willing to fabricate? Closing hook. In part 5, we dig into a deeper mystery, the secret space program. Why do whistleblowers claim there's a shadow organization flying advanced craft, decades ahead of public technology? Why did former military officers say we've already been to Mars? And why are there sightings of triangle-shaped UFOs near NASA facilities? The answers may take us far beyond Photoshop, into a reality more complex and more terrifying than most of us are ready for. But you're here. You're asking the questions, and now you're beginning to see NASA's story might only be the surface. Part 5, the secret space program, NASA's shadow twin. Opening, slow, ominous music builds, a heartbeat underneath, then narrator speaks softly but clearly. There's the NASA you know, the smiling astronauts, the rockets launching into the sky, the classrooms filled with space posters and model shuttles. It's patriotic, it's scientific, it's the future, wrapped in red, white, and blue. But what if that NASA is just the front? What if there's another NASA, one you'll never see on the news? A hidden agency, a secret twin, operating in the shadows, decades beyond anything we've been told. Tonight, we're going to follow the trail, because former insiders say there's a secret space program, and it's been active for a long, long time. Narrator's tone shifts, skeptical but intrigued. Let's start with this. Why are there so many whistleblowers from the military, intelligence community, and even former NASA engineers telling the same story, different names, different backgrounds, same message? NASA is the puppet show. The real space work is being done in black projects. They talk about reverse-engineered alien tech, bases on the moon, travel to Mars, not in the future, but already happening. Crazy? Maybe. But let's not forget, for decades, governments denied the existence of Area 51, until suddenly, one day, they admitted it was real. So ask yourself, what else haven't they told us? Scene shifts, sound of classified stamps, flickers of redacted files. The US government's black budget, the money that goes to top secret programs, is enormous. In 2023 alone, the Pentagon admitted to over $90 billion in classified spending. But no one, not Congress, not the public, knows exactly where it goes. One former Lockheed Martin engineer, Ben Rich, the father of the stealth bomber, once said, "We already have the means to travel among the stars, but these technologies are locked up in black projects. It would take an act of God to ever get them out." Did you catch that? We already have the means. So why is NASA still using 1960s-style rockets to go back to the moon? Are they just pretending? Tone deepens, intensity rises, like pulling the curtain back. In 2001, a man named Gary McKinnon hacked into NASA and Pentagon computers. He wasn't looking for weapons. He wasn't even trying to harm the government. He was searching for proof of free energy and UFO technology. What he found? A document titled Non-Terrestrial Officers and a list of ship-to-ship transfers. But here's the thing. These weren't naval vessels on Earth. These were off-planet craft. Ships with names like USS LeMay and USS Hillenkoetter, names that don't exist in any public registry. So what are they? Secret spacecraft. And who are these non-terrestrial officers? NASA claimed it was nothing. The U.S. tried to extradite McKinnon for years. But if what he found was nothing, why try to destroy his life over it? Narrator pauses, then speaks slowly, chillingly. In part 4, we asked why NASA hides or fakes Earth images. Now we ask, is it because they're hiding something far bigger, far older than we've ever imagined? Multiple whistleblowers, including some with high-level military clearances, say NASA isn't in charge at all. They say there's a separate command structure, one connected to aerospace giants like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, and more disturbingly, to ancient off-world technology recovered from crash sites. Sound insane? Maybe. But listen to Dr. Stephen Greer, former emergency doctor turned government disclosure advocate. He claims to have interviewed over 500 military and intelligence witnesses. Not all of them believe in little green men. But nearly all of them agree. There is a breakaway civilization with technology that can defy gravity, travel faster than light, and it's been operating in secret for decades. Insert eerie silence, just a low hum. Then continue softly. One more name for you, William Tompkins. He worked for Douglas Aircraft in the 1950s, a major NASA contractor. He claimed he was part of a team designing interplanetary spacecraft based on information from Navy operatives who had interacted with alien beings. Yes, alien. Tompkins said the U.S. Navy had a secret space fleet by the early 1980s, massive triangle-shaped vessels. Personnel stationed in orbit, even contact with extraterrestrial alliances. He gave interviews, wrote documents, swore under oath. He wasn't selling books. He died quietly. But not before saying, NASA is the public face of a much deeper, darker program. Narrator draws breath, then steadies tone. Still not convinced? Then answer this. Why do so many astronauts, after leaving NASA, begin to speak differently? Why did Dr. Edgar Mitchell, Apollo 14 astronaut, say, there has been ET visitation, there have been crashed craft, there has been a cover-up? Or Buzz Aldrin, who once said he saw a UFO following Apollo 11, and that NASA edited it out? These aren't conspiracy theorists. These are American heroes. What changed? Moment of reflection. You've seen the rocket launches, you've seen the flags, the patches, the ceremonies, but maybe it's all theater, a stage show to distract us, to keep us looking up, but not too closely. Because behind the curtain, there might be fleets you'll never see, satellites you'll never hear about, missions you'll never be told exist, all operating under black budgets. Using propulsion we've been told is impossible. And the name on the front? Not NASA. Something older, something darker, maybe not even human, calm, haunting tone. So now we ask, if NASA isn't the main player in space exploration, then who is? And more importantly, what have they found out there? Coming up in part 6, The Lunar Lie, what NASA found on the far side of the moon. Why do they keep returning to the same few spots? Why are there no high-res images of the moon's dark side? And what did Chinese probes allegedly capture that NASA won't talk about? We're going further than ever before, and what we find may change your view of the moon and the truth forever. Stay curious, stay questioning, and never stop looking up. Part 6, The Lunar Lie, what NASA found on the far side of the moon. Opening soft static like a lost transmission, then a deep breath from the narrator. Have you ever noticed how familiar the moon is? It's always there, hanging in our sky like an ancient sentinel, silent, cold, watching. We've stared at it for millennia. Poets praised it, lovers danced under it, children made wishes to it. But here's the strange thing. We only ever see one side of it, one face, one hemisphere. The other side, the far side, we call it the dark side of the moon, even though it gets plenty of sunlight. So why does NASA rarely talk about it? Why do we have so few high-resolution photos? And why did astronauts, the ones who did see it, come back forever changed? Tonight, we go where NASA doesn't want you to go, to the far side, and we ask, what exactly is hidden there? Calm, but with rising tension. Let's begin with the basics. The moon is tidally locked to Earth. That means the same side always faces us. A cosmic coincidence, they say. But here's the twist. When we sent probes around the far side, starting in the 1960s, we didn't just find craters, we found structures. Strange, geometric patterns, right angles, domes. Towers that cast shadows miles long. NASA dismissed them as natural formations, random tricks of light. But several whistleblowers and former employees tell a different story. Cue archival radio fuzz. Cut to 1969 Apollo mission. When the Apollo 10 crew orbited the moon, their communication was suddenly cut from public broadcast. But audio recordings later released revealed something eerie. They reported hearing strange music coming through the headset. Astronauts described it as outer space-type music, echoing, unexplained, haunting. NASA brushed it off as radio interference. But here's what no one explains. Why was the signal only affected when passing over the far side? And what was that sound? Narrator leans in, like revealing a secret. Then came Apollo 11. You know the story. Neil Armstrong steps onto the moon. But you probably haven't heard this part. Several ham radio operators around the world claimed they picked up uncensored transmissions from Apollo 11, audio that NASA never aired. In those recordings, Armstrong allegedly said, "They're here watching us. They're parked on the edge of the crater. They're observing." Now, let's be clear. This hasn't been officially confirmed. But decades later, Buzz Aldrin made a strange admission. He said they saw a UFO on the way to the moon, and he said they couldn't talk about it because NASA would shut the mission down. So ask yourself, why would these men, astronauts trained to be rational, professional, composed, say things like this? Were they imagining it? Or were they trying to tell us something more? Shift to modern day. China enters the scene. In 2019, China's Chang'e 4 became the first spacecraft in history to land on the far side of the moon. Unlike NASA, they didn't limit public access to images, at least not immediately. And what the Chinese rover found shocked independent researchers. One photo showed what looked like a cube-shaped structure on the horizon. Another revealed what some call a glass dome, nearly symmetrical, glowing faintly. Beijing called it a mystery hut. Then, after a few days, the images stopped. No follow-ups, no explanation, just silence. Sound familiar? Insert atmospheric music, soft droning tones with static. Let's talk about Ingo Swann. He was a remote viewer, part of a CIA program during the Cold War to psychically spy on enemies. Crazy? Maybe, but this was a real program, funded, documented, proven. Swann claimed he was tasked with remotely viewing the moon. What he saw? Structures, lights, beings in suits working on the surface. When he told his handler, he was allegedly told, "You weren't supposed to see that." Then Swann said he was threatened, told to keep quiet. He did for years, until he couldn't anymore. Narrator now becomes serious, grounded, logical tone. Let's slow down. Could it all be coincidence? Could strange lights, sounds, and shapes all have rational explanations? Sure. But then, how do we explain the moon's impossible orbit? Scientists still don't understand how such a small celestial body ended up perfectly positioned to cause solar eclipses. The moon is 400 times smaller than the sun, but also 400 times closer, just enough to perfectly block it. That's not just rare, that's statistically almost impossible. Now combine that with this. The moon's density is lower than expected. Its crust is strangely uniform. Some seismometers recorded it ringing like a bell when hit by boosters. A hollow moon? An artificial moon? Theories once laughed at are now being re-examined, not by conspiracy theorists, but by engineers, by physicists, by those brave enough to say something doesn't add up. Lowers voice, whisper-like intensity. So here's the big question. If there are structures on the far side, if there are beings, if someone or something is already there, could that explain why we stopped going? NASA went to the moon 6 times between 1969 and 1972. Then nothing. 50 years of silence. Suddenly they say they're going back, but not to the far side, just to the same old landing sites. Why? What are they avoiding? Or worse, who told them to stay away? Closing reflection, slow cinematic fade out. We've always looked up at the moon and seen a mystery, but maybe it's more than that. Maybe it's not just a mystery. Maybe it's a message, a reminder that we are not alone, that the universe is older, stranger, and more crowded than we've been allowed to believe, and that someone or something wants to keep it that way. Coming up in Part 7, Vanishing Missions, the Lost Astronauts of NASA. What about the missions we never heard about? The ones that never made the news? And what happened to the astronauts who were erased from history? Get ready, because the next story isn't just a conspiracy, it's a disappearance. Stay curious and keep looking up. Part 7, Vanishing Missions, the Lost Astronauts of NASA. Opening, ambient hum like the low buzz of an old monitor turning on. Space missions are precise. Every second is planned, every crew member accounted for, or that's what they want you to believe, because hidden beneath the history books and official timelines lies something much darker, the story of the missions that vanished. Astronauts who were trained, launched, and then gone. No return, no record, no explanation. Tonight we explore the chilling possibility that NASA didn't just cover up what they found in space, they covered up who they lost. Narrator slows down, calm, deliberate. Let's rewind. During the height of the Cold War, space was more than science. It was power, prestige, and most of all, a race to prove superiority. Both the United States and the Soviet Union pushed their astronauts to the brink. Test flights, experimental crafts, secret missions, some of these were public, most were not. And the cost? Lives, disappearances, entire missions erased from public memory. Let's start with something official, but rarely mentioned. Insert eerie radio beep, 1967, Apollo 1. On January 27, 1967, 3 astronauts, Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee, died during a ground test inside the Apollo 1 capsule. It wasn't a launch, just a simulation, yet somehow a fire broke out in an oxygen-rich cabin with no escape. Their screams were recorded, their deaths blamed on engineering flaws. But here's where it gets suspicious. Grissom had been outspoken about NASA's safety issues. He even hung a lemon on a simulator and called it a death trap. And days before the fire, he allegedly told his wife, "If anything happens to me, it won't be an accident." Coincidence? Or was he silenced? And what was he preparing to reveal? Narrator's tone darkens. Now let's move to 1969. The world was watching Apollo 11, but did you know there was an Apollo 20? You're probably thinking, wait, that never happened. NASA only went up to Apollo 17. That's what they say. But leaked footage and whistleblower accounts suggest otherwise. One man, William Rutledge, claimed to be part of Apollo 20, a joint USA-Soviet mission launched in 1976. The mission's goal? To investigate a massive spacecraft discovered on the far side of the moon near the Delport Isaac crater. He even released grainy video footage showing a cigar-shaped craft embedded in the lunar surface, alien-like beings in stasis, ruins that looked impossibly ancient. Was it real or an elaborate hoax? Debunkers were quick to attack. But here's what no one explained. Why did NASA declassify nothing about Apollo 18 to 20? Where did the allocated budgets go? And who were the astronauts trained but never listed? Cue low heartbeat sound, rising unease. In the Soviet Union, it was even darker. There's a conspiracy known as the Lost Cosmonauts. The theory? That the USSR launched several manned missions before Yuri Gagarin, the first man in space. But those missions failed, and the cosmonauts, they died alone in space, erased from records. No funerals, no graves, just silence. In 1961, 2 Italian amateur radio operators, the Giudica Cordiglia brothers, picked up strange transmissions, breathing sounds, heartbeats, a woman's voice crying in Russian, "I am hot, I see flames, am I going to crash?" Weeks later, nothing. No follow-up, no acknowledgement from the Soviets, and years later, Russian officials admitted they buried several failed missions. So here's the uncomfortable question. If the Soviets could erase their own heroes, could NASA have done the same? Shift tone, scientific questioning. We like to think space is perfectly safe today, that astronauts go up, come back, smile for cameras. But space is hostile, unforgiving, filled with radiation, micrometeoroids, and things we don't even understand yet. And here's something most people don't know. Over 20 astronauts trained during the Apollo era never flew. Some were reassigned, others retired mysteriously. A few, their files are missing. People like Robert Lawrence, the first African-American astronaut, died in a jet crash. Clifton Williams, who was set to go on Apollo 12, died in a training accident. Theodore Freeman, killed when a bird struck his jet engine. Tragic, yes, but so many, so conveniently removed right before major missions. It raises a chilling possibility that some astronauts may have been selected for something else, something they were never meant to return from. Narrator softens, almost a whisper. There's another kind of disappearance, the psychological kind. Several astronauts came back different, withdrawn, paranoid, silent. Take Neil Armstrong. He avoided the public for decades, rarely gave interviews. When he did, his words were strange, cryptic. At a White House event, he said, "There are great ideas undiscovered, breakthroughs available to those who can remove one of truth's protective layers." What did he mean? What truth needed protecting? Pause. Then a soft tone, growing in intensity. All of this brings us to a single terrifying theory that NASA and other space agencies encountered something in space, something ancient, something intelligent, and instead of telling the world, they buried it, along with the names of those who knew too much. The lost missions may not just be accidents. They may be cover stories, because once you send a person into the unknown, sometimes they don't come back, and sometimes they come back changed. Closing, slow fade, somber music. So now you must ask, how many astronauts were trained for missions that never existed on paper? What knowledge did they carry, and what price did they pay for it? Were their fates covered in silence so we could keep believing the stars were safe? Coming up in Part 8, Alien Collaboration, did NASA make a deal? If we found intelligent life, did we make contact? Or worse, did we make a deal? And who's really running the space program? It's time to look beyond the stars, because the next story may not be human at all. Part 8, Alien Collaboration, did NASA make a deal? Opening, faint radio static, growing louder, then fading into silence. For decades, the world asked one question: are we alone in the universe? But maybe we've been asking the wrong question all along, because what if we were never alone? What if contact has already been made? And what if NASA didn't just find extraterrestrial life, they partnered with it? Tonight, we dig into one of the most controversial and chilling claims in space history, that NASA, under cover of exploration, has been working with alien civilizations, not for science, but for control. Narrator's tone sharpens, building intrigue. Let's rewind to July 20th, 1969. The Apollo 11 moon landing. We all remember Neil Armstrong's famous words, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." But what you didn't hear, what he said off mic. According to multiple insiders, including NASA contractor Otto Binder, the following message was intercepted by ham radio operators on an alternate frequency. They're here. They're watching us. They're lined up on the far side of the crater. Now, NASA officially denies it, but so do they deny the existence of Apollo 20, UFO footage, and extraterrestrial bases on the moon, which raises a deeper question. If NASA did encounter non-human intelligence, did they make a deal? Build up with mystery, slow delivery. Start with Project Serpo, allegedly a secret exchange program between the US government and an alien race from the Zeta Reticuli system. Here's how the story goes. In 1965, 12 military personnel, including scientists, linguists, and a pilot, were selected to travel to another planet aboard an alien spacecraft. Destination, Serpo, a planet light years away. Only 8 returned. Their identities were never revealed. Their mission? To learn alien technology, to study an advanced civilization, and to broker cooperation. Now, you might say that's not NASA, but consider this: every space shuttle, satellite, and probe launched by NASA collects data. But who controls the data? And more importantly, who's allowed to see it? NASA isn't just science. It's a government agency bound to top secret defense protocols. So if we did find intelligent life, why wouldn't it be hidden under the highest levels of secrecy? Insert soft hum like a distant power source. Let's talk the 1960s. Our advancements have skyrocketed. Microchips, fiber optics, infrared imaging, anti-gravity research. According to insiders like Bob Lazar, these technologies didn't come from human invention, but reverse-engineered alien craft. Lazar, who worked at a site known as S4 near Area 51, described 9 saucer-like vehicles stored in underground hangars, some partially functional. His job? To study a propulsion system based on element 115, something we didn't officially synthesize until decades later. Lazar was discredited, fired, erased. But his story never changed. And guess what? Years later, element 115, now known as moscovium, was officially added to the periodic table. So ask yourself, was Lazar telling the truth? And if NASA got its hands on this technology, what else could they build? Narrator's voice lowers, conspiratorial tone. Let's not forget the STS-48 incident. In 1991, during a space shuttle mission, live footage showed a bright object moving across Earth's orbit, a flash of light from the surface, the object rapidly changing direction at impossible speeds. NASA called it ice particles. But physicists weren't convinced. Why? Because ice doesn't accelerate at 17,000 miles per hour and make 90-degree turns. That's not just unexplained. That's impossible by known human standards. Unless it's not ours. Introduce military links. In 1997, former Canadian Defense Minister Paul Hellyer claimed, UFOs are as real as the airplanes flying overhead. He went further, stating that multiple governments, including the US, had ongoing relationships with alien civilizations. His words were dismissed by mainstream media. But Hellyer had nothing to gain. No book, no fame, just a warning. They walk among us, and some of them are not friendly. And you have to wonder, if governments knew, if astronauts encountered beings on the moon or in deep space, wouldn't NASA, the face of our space exploration, be the perfect cover? Narrator pauses, then shifts to science. Let's consider one more possibility, the Fermi paradox. With billions of stars and habitable planets, why haven't we heard from alien life? Physicist Enrico Fermi asked, where is everybody? Maybe the answer is, they're already here. And our space agencies, especially NASA, have known for decades. Why don't we hear signals? Why haven't they landed on the White House lawn? Because open contact might collapse religion, shake governments, destroy social order. So instead, collaboration in the shadows, build suspense toward the end. What if some of NASA's missions weren't about exploration, but about negotiation? What if some shuttles weren't just launching satellites, but exchanging something else? Crew for knowledge, silence for safety, secrets for technology. It sounds like fiction, but the gaps are real. Where are the full tapes from Apollo missions? Why are key Mars images censored or missing? Why do astronauts keep going silent after retirement? Is it guilt or a contract they can't break? Closing. Voice soft, reflective, chilling. They say the truth is out there, but what if the truth is already here, behind locked doors, encrypted files, and black budgets? What if every rocket launched isn't just a scientific mission, but a message to someone else? And what if deep inside NASA, they're not just hiding the truth about space, they're hiding who we've been working with all along? Coming up in Part 9, the moon isn't what you think. You've heard the stories. But are you ready to hear what astronauts saw on the dark side of the moon? Structures, lights, voices, and maybe something older than Earth itself. End of Part 8. Part 9. The moon isn't what you think. Opening, eerie ambient music, subtle echo like you're inside a cavernous void. We all think we know the moon. It's the silent companion to Earth, the soft glow in the night sky, the place where humanity planted its first flag beyond our world. But what if I told you? The moon isn't what we think it is. Not just a lifeless rock, not just a natural satellite, but something much stranger. Something that's been watching us long before we ever looked up. Tonight, we go deep into one of the most mind-bending claims in modern conspiracy lore, that the moon is not just unnatural, it might not even be real. Narrator's tone sharpens. Let's start with a basic question. How did the moon get there? Mainstream science says it formed from the debris of a colossal collision, a Mars-sized object hitting the early Earth. Sounds reasonable, right? Except the moon is too large compared to Earth for a typical satellite. Its orbit is perfectly circular, which is rare for moons. It's tidally locked, always showing us the same face. Its density is suspiciously low, as if it's hollow. Yes, you heard that right. Hollow. Introduce real scientific evidence. In 1969, during the Apollo 12 mission, astronauts deliberately crashed part of the lunar module onto the moon to measure seismic activity. What happened next shocked everyone. According to NASA's own records, the moon rang like a bell for nearly an hour. Scientists like Maurice Ewing, one of the lead seismologists on the mission, said, "We were shocked. It reverberated in a way no solid object should." They repeated the test during Apollo 13. Same result. Now, what does that mean? A solid, natural object doesn't echo. It absorbs impact. But a metallic shell, a hollow structure, that rings. So we ask again, is the moon natural, or was it placed there? Narrator shifts tone, more serious, provocative. Let's talk about the Zwicky anomaly. In the 1970s, astronomers found unusual mass concentrations, mascons, beneath the moon's surface. These mascons create gravitational irregularities. But here's the weird part. They seem to be strategically positioned like supports inside an artificial structure. This theory was echoed by Russian scientists Michael Vasin and Alexander Sherbakov in a 1970 article titled, Is the moon the creation of alien intelligence? Their theory? That the moon is a spaceship covered in layers of artificial material, then coated with rock and debris to make it appear natural. Crazy? Maybe. But explain this. Why do we have no record of a moon in ancient Sumerian texts? Why do multiple cultures describe a time before the moon appeared? Why does it perfectly cover the sun during a total eclipse, something mathematically improbable to the point of impossibility? Coincidence or design? Shift to astronaut testimonies, mysterious atmosphere. Now let's go back to the astronauts. In part 8, we talked about strange transmissions from Apollo 11, but it wasn't just Armstrong. Buzz Aldrin, Edgar Mitchell, Gordon Cooper all made strange remarks over the years. Mitchell, the sixth man on the moon, said, "We are not alone. They've been coming here for a long time." But the most disturbing story comes from Apollo 17, the last manned mission to the moon. According to leaked transcripts, astronauts encountered structures, geometric formations, and even light sources on the dark side. Footage exists, but much of it was mysteriously lost. Even NASA admits this. Over 13,000 reels of Apollo data, gone. Gone. Tapes of the most important moment in human history, erased. By accident or to hide what they saw. Narrator slows down, deliberate pacing. Let's dive deeper. The Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, launched in 2009, was supposed to map the moon in high resolution. It did, but when researchers requested full images of certain areas, especially around Tycho crater, access was denied. Why? And why are some images released by NASA so heavily blurred? One particular anomaly, dubbed the Shard, was captured by Lunar Orbiter 3 in 1967. It shows a vertical object nearly a mile tall, casting a long shadow. NASA said it was a photographic defect, but analysts say the lighting, shadows, and scale are all consistent with a real solid object. A tower? A beacon? Or something left behind by whoever put the moon here. Introduce outside sources linking more dots. A whistleblower from the U.S. Army's remote viewing program claimed in the 1980s, "We viewed the moon. There are bases, structures, even ships, but they're not ours." And then there's Ken Johnston, a former NASA employee who worked on Apollo image processing. He stated publicly that he saw original photos of artificial structures. He was ordered to destroy them. He kept copies. NASA labeled him a fraud, but never addressed the images directly. Why? Because confronting them would mean admitting that we're not alone and never have been. Closing, mysterious, thought-provoking. The moon is always watching. It controls our tides, our calendars, even our sleep cycles. But maybe it's doing more than that. Maybe it's not just a piece of the sky. Maybe it's a monitoring station, a cosmic observatory, a device placed in perfect orbit by design. By who? Why? And for how long? The ancients called it the eye in the sky. Maybe they were right. So next time you look up at the moon, ask yourself, are you looking at a rock? Or is something looking back? Coming up in part 10, the final veil, we've reached the last layer, the final question. Why all the secrets? Why all the lies? And what happens if the truth finally gets out? Will humanity ascend or collapse? Part 10, the final veil, opening, low hum, slow fade-in music like the distant echo of space. We've come a long way, from missing tapes and altered images, to astronauts speaking in codes, to secrets buried in moon dust. Now here we are, the end of the road, or maybe just the beginning. Because tonight, we pull back the final veil. Not just on what NASA might be hiding, but on why, and what it could mean for all of us. Are you ready? Narrator slows down, almost a whisper. Let's ask a question no one dares to ask. Why would NASA and the government behind it hide the truth about space? Let's be clear. We're talking about a coordinated effort spanning decades, involving multiple nations, billions of dollars, and some of the brightest minds on Earth. So, what could be so dangerous, so shocking, that they'd rather we live in the dark? Shift tone, logical, reasoned. Let's explore the top possibilities. Theory 1. Aliens are real, and they've always been here. This is the foundation for everything we've covered. The strange sightings on the moon, the silence around Mars anomalies, the lost footage, the muted astronauts. It points to one conclusion. We've made contact, and we've been ordered or maybe warned to stay silent. Remember what Wernher von Braun, NASA's founding father, allegedly warned before his death? The last card will be the alien card. First the Russians, then terrorists, then rogue nations, and finally aliens. It's all about weaponizing space. That raises the next question. Are they already in control? Or are we on the verge of open contact and they're trying to manage the panic? Theory 2, the simulation hypothesis. Now let's take a deeper, more philosophical turn. What if we're not alone? Because none of this is real? Think about it. The moon fits perfectly over the sun in an eclipse. The constants in physics seem fine-tuned for life. Space behaves more like code than chaos, digital like patterns, repeated sequences. Even some top NASA engineers, like Rich Terrell, have said, the universe behaves exactly like a computer simulation. So what does that mean? That space, with all its mysteries, is part of a designed illusion. And NASA, they're not just exploring space, they're protecting the firewall, the edge of the map. Theory 3, there's another angle. Not aliens, not computers, but power. What if the truth about space, whatever it may be, is too liberating? What if the knowledge of ancient civilizations on Mars, or intelligent design behind the moon, or access to infinite energy through anti-gravity could break down the entire system? Economic systems, religious institutions, governments. Because if humanity suddenly knew that, we're not alone, we've been lied to, and we are far more powerful than we're told, would we still obey, or would we rise? And that might be what scares them most. Let's revisit Gary McKinnon, the British hacker who infiltrated NASA and Pentagon servers in 2001. He claimed to find images of UFOs not seen by the public, a list of non-terrestrial officers, ship logs of unknown spacecraft. He wasn't after fame, he was after the truth. But the US tried to extradite him for years. Why so aggressive? If he found nothing, why silence him? Because maybe he found the final piece. Reframe around current events. And what about recent disclosures? The US Navy now confirms unidentified aerial phenomena. Congress held hearings. Whistleblowers say under oath we have recovered non-human craft. NASA launched a UAP task force but gave no answers. It's trickle-down truth, controlled leaks, carefully timed narratives. They're not telling us the truth. They're preparing us for a version of the truth. But why now? Narrator pauses. Slow, weighty voice. Maybe. Something's coming. A revelation. A shift. Maybe the secrets can't be contained much longer. Private space companies, SpaceX, Blue Origin, are racing toward Mars. What happens when they find what NASA never told us? Or worse, what if they already know? So here we are. 10 parts, dozens of questions, pieces of a puzzle. Some lost, some hidden, some staring us right in the face. And what have we learned? We've learned that the truth is never handed to you. It's something you have to dig for. And more importantly, something you must decide what to do with. Because if everything we've explored is true, then nothing is as it seems. Not the moon, not Mars, not even the stars above us. Closing build atmosphere, hopeful but chilling. So, what now? You could dismiss all of this as fantasy. You could laugh it off, roll your eyes, go back to your routine. But then you'll hear that voice again, that tiny whisper when you look up at the sky. What if they lied? And suddenly, you can't unsee it. The patterns, the gaps, the anomalies. So maybe that's the final truth. The universe is full of secrets. And NASA, they've been the gatekeepers. But the gates are beginning to crack. Final thought. If everything we've been told about space is a lie, then what does that make us? Observers, prisoners, or pioneers? Finally ready to leave the cave and see what's beyond. The choice is yours. End of part 10. Thank you for staying with this journey. Now, let me ask you, what do you believe? Or better yet, what will you do now that you know? Thank you for spending your time with Listen and Imagine. We hope this journey sparked your thoughts and stirred your imagination. If you enjoyed this experience, please subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and leave a comment to let us know what you think. Your support helps Listen and Imagine continue to grow and bring more stories to life. Until next time, keep listening and keep imagining. Thank you.